Hi, I am Kevin Quigley, and welcome to Tarot Off the Cuff. I picked up my first tarot deck in 1982 when I was 12 years old. I spent the summer giving readings to my friends and kind of freaking them out, and then I misplaced it. Maybe 15 years later, I picked up another tarot deck, and I've been reading professionally pretty much since then. Tarot reading for me is about building up a conversation. A conversation not just between myself and my client, but between our higher selves, so that we might bring down some information that might help make us a little bit more conscious and maybe even our lives a little bit better.
Hello, everybody. I am here on this strange August afternoon outside. I am shuffling up my light Seer's tarot deck, and there's a bit of noise in the neighborhood. I'm thinking it's far enough away that it won't contaminate my audio, but if you hear some chainsaws or that sort of thing, the neighbors are bringing down some trees. Let me take a quick second and gather myself and let that one sit. Okay, what do we got? Oh, funny. I'd usually turn it to face me, but my eyes were closed. Okay. This is the Eight of Swords from the Light Seer's Tarot deck. So what does that bring to mind in terms of topic? Well, we've got someone in the card who's sitting before a mirror, and in the reflection, they are they're bound with string or rope. There's a blindfold on her. Let me double check to make sure I'm remembering it correctly. Yeah, and then she's got crows, these pesky crows that are around sort of tormenting her there. It's an overhead shot, so we're looking down on the figure on the card, and oftentimes we use that kind of perspective to disempower, so that we make the subject of the image feel less powerful. And if we look at her actual person that's not in the mirror, there's no blindfold, there's no crows, and there's no rope. So there's an idea that the bondage or the restriction that's in place here doesn't really exist. That is a fascinating thing. I love this version of the Eight of Swords. And you'll oftentimes find similar clues in in a Rider-Waite clone type of deck as well. That this is not real bondage, it's loose, right? So, topic-wise, let's talk about liberation. And in fact, let's go even a little bit further. Let's talk about the kinds of things that we attach ourselves to that make us feel less free, but they don't really have to. How about that? There are an enormous number of traditions associated with tarot reading that go back sometimes even centuries, and sometimes not. We don't really know where most of these things come from or why, but I have seen and heard, and I bet you, if I really had time to think about it, been subject to or subjected myself to a number of these that at the end of the day, to be super frank, they're just crap. This idea that we accept the limitations that bind us, that keep us tied up. Sometimes these are incredibly useful things. So I'm going to talk about a few that in my own practice I use. I would even go so far as to say that perhaps I developed them or chose them myself, but maybe they even came from another source, or I noticed another reader doing this, or something I read, and I decided, oh, boom, that's mine now. I'm gonna take that. So here's a couple of them. I really like to make sure I take a moment, if I'm reading with someone in person, that they get to cut the cards. I know some tarot readers go so far as to say they want their clients to shuffle their cards, and then other tarot readers that never want anyone to touch their cards, especially if they use sort of rare or expensive decks. I do like the physical connection. However, I found at the beginning of all the COVID quarantining and stuff, when in-person reading was not something we could do, and we had to resort to virtual means. And lots of I've done FaceTime readings, I've done readings on Skype. Zoom seems to be the place that most people are comfortable with. So the readings I've done on Zoom, I can't physically have them touch the cards, right? So I had to come up with a new form that worked for me that I used in every single reading, but I had to liberate myself from this idea that I would use the moment. I'd say, take a minute to quiet yourself, to connect with your higher wisdom, and then cut the deck into 3 piles, and then I will reassemble it. That was my deal, right? And now, if I'm doing a virtual reading, I'll say something like, take a moment to sort of close your eyes, quiet yourself, connect yourself with your higher wisdom, and in a second, I'm going to cut the deck while I'm doing the same as you and reassemble it, and then pay attention. You may get a whisper from higher wisdom suggesting that you might want to change your question or your topic in some way, or maybe even go with something completely different, and you might not, right? So, and then we would take, 10 seconds or so to do that, cut our cards, and then come down with a good question. Okay, so that's one of the things that sort of trapped me. Let's think of some that some tarot readers hang on to that I don't. If you like these, make up your own dealio, right? So you can throw away any of my caveats that you want, right? And keep the ones that you like. But here's one. This idea that your first tarot deck should always be given. It should be a gift to you and not something you go out and purchase for yourself. I say yuck to that one. It totally limits the ability of an individual to volitionally step into this field and start studying and start doing the work. Yuck. I don't like that one at all. That being said, it has affected me in a positive way, in that I also have sort of a value and a practice that anytime I'm talking to someone and they are like, ooh, I'm interested in that, if I can afford it right in that moment, sometimes I haven't been able to, but usually I can, I get them a deck. And I just give it to them. I don't put any requirements on them at all. And I'll connect and say, if you're interested in a class, I do teach, right? I do like the idea of giving people the nudge. And in fact, I just had a conversation with my niece. She expressed interest when she was 13, and I bought her a deck. And she was telling me that she just, she didn't have the discipline to get into it and study, and she used it. And then she started using the cards as bookmarks and little, she put them all over the places in mirrors or in coat pockets and things like that. And then she is now 24. So 10, 11 years later, and she was saying she went back a couple of years ago and she bought that deck again because she loves it. And now she's actually studying and reading, which is kind of cool. But she's also finding those cards all over the place in her life. So how cool is that? Every once in a while she discovers, she'll open an old book or put on a coat that she hasn't worn for a while, and then there's a tarot card, boom, jumps out at her. So that actually helps with her study in interesting ways. I thought that was really kind of cool. Let's see, some other caveats. There are tarot readers that require a fair amount of conversation and or prep before someone sits down with them for a tarot reading. Go through, check out this page on my website and answer the following questions, or go through these types of things. At the end of the day, I think that can be an okay thing, but for the most part, I am like, nope, I'd rather just sit down with somebody and talk freely. My reading style is about conversation. It's not about being over-attached to ideas, and especially I like not having much information when we start at all, because if all I'm doing is reading the cards, as opposed to giving a personal reaction to a person's situation from my own moral center, my own set of values, instead what I wind up doing is giving them just information straight up from the cards, because I don't know what I'm talking about at the end of the day, right? I don't know what their situation is. And that, for me, seems to allow me to give a much more valid, affirming response than if I get mixed up in terms of like, oh, this is a personal reaction and this is what the cards are saying. And then I don't have to fight that battle within myself as I read. I like doing that. Let's see, I've got a couple of others that jumped into my head as I was talking. Let's see if I can remember them. Another is that some readers really get attached to particular spreads. I'm one of these. I've got a couple of spreads that I use all the time. If I'm going to be talking for an hour, I know if we're going to be having a conversation for an hour, I know that I need 8 to 10 cards on the table to really do that. So there are a few spreads that I really like setting up to come to that are flexible enough that they can allow me to have a conversation about just about anything, including the fact that I often don't know what specifically we're talking about, right? So I need that many cards. And then here we go again. There's a moment when I started doing the fairs and the parties. I started with long form readings, which is a little unusual, but then I jumped into the short form of doing fairs and parties and events and stuff like that. And I had to totally reinvent. I had to liberate myself from my own technique of using that many cards down to 2 or 3. Right? So that kind of a liberation, I had tied myself very, very clearly to long form conversation, to moving slow, to starting with the gestalt, downward looking. I'm looking down at the table like this card was looking down at the figure of the card. And pulled myself deeply into that and had no idea how to do short form stuff. And I actually had to practice for a few weeks before my first one. Now it went okay, but boy, changing my pace, changing the amount of information I could give, and even changing my expectation of what a tarot reading can be and how I can help somebody to whatever degree that quickly, in 10 minutes. You got 10 minutes, jump in and jump out, right? Here we go. So it's a completely different form that the long form reading just doesn't prepare you for, really. Knowing the cards, good, but in terms of like what's your rhythm, how do you adjust all that? That was a big change for me. Let's see if I can come up with one more. Let's see, one more quick one that many tarot readers are subject to. Ooh, here's one. Starting with a question. Many, many, many tarot readers spend some really good, strong time investigating and coming up with the right question to ask. I think this is a wonderful and excellent thing to do. However, you don't need to. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I use a cross in so many of my spreads. I love the idea of placing a card down. This card covers you, the first one, and this card crosses you. And those are like X marks the spot on a map. That's going to give me a good picture of where you are right now. And then I use those 2 cards to get my own bearings on how this conversation is going to go. And as we go, I start talking. And in fact, I'm going to change directions a little bit. Sometimes that cross doesn't match what the person thought they were coming to me to have a reading about, right? They might come and say, ooh, I've got some issues in my family. I usually don't want any more information than that, and off we go. And then I get cards that lead me to talk about work, or talk about romance or money or something like that, not family. And I'll say, these cards are heading me in another direction. Is that okay? Chances are we'll circle back, but let's see where this takes us. And then as we read in those readings, I ask quite frequently, how's this feel? Does it feel true and real? Is it useful? And I'll get yeses or nos at that point, and that'll let me to either keep going or to dig deeper. If I get a no, for me, that's, oh, let's dig deeper into this card and see what other kinds of interpretations make sense. And usually within a couple of statements, usually even within one, things even themselves out and things work out really pretty well. So I love reading that way. I love reading without a question. So what happens, I'm going to ask you, if you're somebody that likes your client to have a question, what happens if you don't force them to have one? See what happens. Do a reading that way. Maybe not one for money, maybe do some practice readings for friends, or, go online and say, hey, I'm going to try out a new technique. It's a perfect thing. Does anybody want a free 10-minute reading? Let's see how it goes. Okay, so that was the 8 of Swords from Chris Ann's Light Seers Tarot. My name is Kevin Quigley. I'm so glad you could join us, and we will see you again soon. Hi, thanks for watching. This is Kevin Quigley with Tarot Off the Cuff. If you can take a second, click the subscribe button down below. That'll let you know when a new video is posted and you might want to jump over and watch it. If you hit the thumbs up for the videos that you really like, that will help spread the word, so new people will find Tarot Off the Cuff in their feed, and that helps the channel grow. That would be great. And if you got a question or a comment, positive or negative, whether you agree or disagree, or if you want to add information or your own take on a particular card or a particular topic, put a comment down below. We would love to hear from you. Thanks so much.